Welcome, everyone. Today, I wanted to introduce you, if you haven't already heard of her incredible efforts as a whistleblower, to Kay Griggs. So Kay Griggs was married and started speaking out when she divorced her military husband in 1998. And I hope that she is somewhere sipping on some iced tea at the moment, because she was an incredible survivor coming forward and really speaking out about the corruption and the misuse of military power at a time when the understanding of the secret societies and the military's control of intelligence was really misunderstood and not really out there. She was married to Colonel George Griggs, who was a NATO officer, and he was also head of special ops during his career. And he was an alcoholic. So when he got really drunk, he would actually fill Kay in on all that he'd been up to. And it was almost like he had to get it all off his chest, probably being that he really didn't have a lot of people to talk to about, these horrific crimes. So she was witness to so much of the intelligence operations that the army were running, and found out how the Marine Corps in the US and around the world is actually used as the army assassins. And quite interestingly, she found that the army actually had complete power over the CIA. And if anything, the CIA was really put out as more of a front to deflect from the operations that were occurring within US military, and obviously all of the allied military that follows along, which includes Australia. So she pointed to some really concerning issues with the military being completely infiltrated and in fact run by Kabbalists, by Zionists, and really that the whole of the US forces and allied military were being run by Israel. During the time that her husband was disclosing all of this information to her during his drunken stupors was the 80s and into the early 90s. So the main form of compromising the military at that stage was homosexuality, which was, still very taboo. It wasn't accepted to have that kind of relationship in society at that time. And we know now that, homosexuality is accepted in our culture, and really it's become, child rape that's become the blackmail tool of the powers that be, of the cabal that's operating within the military. And she talks about how the military has been using, their drug trafficking, how they, have these constant wars, these Tavistock war on terror, where the US is invading various countries, and literally that is really done to create this psychological warfare, not just on the country that's being invaded, but on the whole world, because, we're taught that, the enemy's over there. The enemy is, this foreign culture. It's something that we don't understand, when the truth is the enemy is right here at home. And we know that the military is a major, major arm of trafficking. And every time the US military goes into a country, all of that country's resources are sold off. And that unfortunately includes humans through human trafficking, children through child trafficking, and straight into, the rape networks, the international rape networks that are being operated through military intelligence, and the organ harvesting. And there's so many different, organizations and non-for-profits, like the Clinton Foundation, like the White Helmets, like the United Nations, that step in saying that we're here to help, when really they're there to actually capitalize on exploiting and, destroying these countries and removing children from families in a wartime situation. So Kay Griggs' testimony was over 8 hours, and you can find it on YouTube. I'll pop some links below. I've put together some of the most important points that I think everyone really needs to know about how the military operates, about how people actually go up the chain of commands and go into more powerful positions. And it really paints a very concerning picture of just how corrupt the military is and how all of the good people are literally weeded out. Kay was in a state called Virginia, and she was blowing the whistle on military intelligence there. Her husband was in special ops, so the SAS forces. And we hear these stories, of SAS getting out of control and ritual murders, blooding rituals, all of these things, starting to come out, through various inquiries around the world. But where is the actual accountability? Where is the justice for these crimes? Because in the end, even though they might surface for a few weeks or a few months, they really get pushed under the rug because, as Kay says, the military is in control of the courts. They're in control of politics. They're in control of the banks, of Big Pharma. And, this is coming back to when Tavistock first took over the British intelligence community and the British Psychological Warfare Department of the Army. They are really in control of putting out all of the information that goes across the world at any given time, and as a result are able to paint a picture of the military in a very different light to what, the facts, the whistleblowers, and, the truth is that's now coming forward. Virginia is an important state to be considering at the moment because the current military psyop that's running through alternative media under Q is actually based in military intelligence. So in the same intelligence that Kay is blowing the whistle on over 20 years ago. And the question would be, after listening to what Kay has to say, do you really think that this could have been cleaned up from within? Do you really believe that there are good military people that are being able to speak out and take action against, military that are doing the wrong things, doing the trafficking, doing the child rape, running these huge black operations all over the world that are now beginning to affect all of us through the bioweapons, through the chips, through the frequency technology, through the weather control that's now being rolled out over home populations in, ever increasing amounts. Do we really believe that this intelligence is capable of telling the truth on themselves? Another important question to consider is if there are people of military rank speaking out and controlling an operation to uncover the evil within the military, the trafficking networks, the drug networks, wouldn't we expect that the cabal, that the City of London, Israel and Rome would be utilising their whistleblowers against these people and releasing information, releasing videos and photos of these people being compromised, whether it's through, decrepit sexual acts, whether it's through child rape, whether it's through, trafficking of illegal arms and drugs, which we know that happens in every single US invasion of a country. Why isn't this information coming forward if, the cabal is actually at so much threat that the truth could be being released on their operations? I don't see any pushback or any targeting on military, whistleblowers, or in particular, many whistleblowers coming forward at this time, revealing the high level operations. And as Kay was saying, so very often the good people that stand in the way, the good people in the military and the Marines that actually say something's going on here and start asking questions and pushing back on, what they're seeing, what they're finding is actually happening in the service, and what, these taxpayer, paid services are being used for, they're knocked off. They're defamed, they're put into mental institutions. Are we really seeing this at this time? And the alternative media narrative is very much Israel is being saved for last. How do we know that Israel isn't actually being protected? Especially after listening to Kay's incredible testimony coming up, we can really see the level that Israel is being protected by, the Allied forces, by the US Army and by the US Marines. And that's incredibly concerning. And we can see in recent policies, we can see in, SAS even a SAS colonel in Australia speaking out and quoting Bibi Netanyahu. Is that the normal behaviour of a defence for a country?
Bibi Netanyahu said it, patience, absolute patience. You must learn patience. Most military people for the first year or three are having difficulty understanding it's a different world.
Well, our NSA, which is called Unit 8200, it's pretty big. How big do you think it is? Well, I'll give you a hint, okay? You know the Five Eyes? Israel is the sixth eye? No, Israel is the second eye. Israel is the second eye. Israel is the second eye.
To be quoting the Israeli Prime Minister. I'll leave that for you to decide. So it's an incredible testimony. I hope you all enjoy it. And I hope, if anything, it brings forward the most important thing at this time, and that's the free thought. The free thought to think your own questions and not have those questions directed by media, directed by politicians, directed by the alternative media. Common sense has to come back, and by listening to our whistleblowers, we can gain this incredible snapshot of truth that in many ways is otherwise filtered.
Your name is Catherine Pollard Griggs?
Yes.
You are the wife of Colonel George Griggs?
Yes.
11 years of marriage?
Yes.
It's true that your husband is and has been the head of special operations under Admiral Kelso, NATO?
Yes.
And it's true that you were the head of the hospitality committee?
Yes.
You were the member of the executive board of NATO's Wives Club?
Absolutely.
And also that your husband's background includes NATO Defense College in Rome?
Yes.
Princeton class of 1959?
Yes.
His intelligence career, his spy career began in Vietnam?
Yes.
And it's also true that it continues unto this day?
Absolutely, under General Wilhelm.
And that your husband was the liaison between the White House and President Jamal of Beirut, Lebanon, at the time of the bombing of the Marine barracks in Lebanon?
Yes.
And in fact, your husband was an alcoholic.
Absolutely.
And probably
Incredible.
is to this day.
Absolutely.
And during these drunken stupors, he would, so to speak, blab on and tell you everything he knew about the intelligence community.
Everything.
Nothing was hid.
No.
It was like he wanted to relieve himself and to unburden his heart.
Yes.
And so he told you everything that you now know about the intelligence community.
Yes.
And that you are talking about. And in fact, he told you that they knew the bombing was coming down in Beirut before it occurred.
Absolutely.
And also, by your association with him, you have come to understand and know, this, as shocking as this may sound to the people who are viewing this, that the United States military is literally run by sexual deviants heavy on the homosexual side.
Truly.
And that in the United States military, people like Jeffrey Dahmer and Kaczynski and McVeigh and Oswald and a host of other people who have a sexual deviant background, primarily homosexual, these individuals are actually sought out by people within the military, the Army, for advancement into intelligence type work because they are so easy to control. And they actually become mind slaves, and that the U.S. military, literally, as outrageous as it sounds, is a mind control operation.
Yes, totally now. Totally now. They've gotten rid of the good folks.
What is this this consistent thread of the sexual degeneracy and the homosexuality and just the raw, base nature that seems to be so prevalent? Have you ever determined what it is? I mean, why?
Well, it's a way to handle them, to control them.
I mean, years ago, you thought of people like General Eisenhower as an upright man. I don't know.
I know some things about him.
How far back can we go to where you find people that are decent, moral, and upright?
Right.
Where you had real people who defended the Constitution, who had a feeling.
Robert E. Lee was.
There were nationalists and and America first, you got to go back a good ways, probably.
Absolutely. You see, growing up in Norfolk, Virginia, my whole family have been naval officers and also working. In other words, they would enter the service during a time of war, of need, and then they go back to being fathers and being husbands. I had a wonderful father, wonderful grandparents, wonderful family who put their family first. Well, they put their God first, Christ, and then their wives and their sons and their children. This is the way America was built. Now, these generals in the Marine Corps and Army, they don't look at it that way, according to my husband. They are ordered, and my husband, being chief of staff, told his men it was like this. It's the Marine Corps first, the Brotherhood, the Cherry Marine, you know, the bonding that goes on. Mm-hmm. The Marine Corps comes before God, before Jesus Christ, before the country, and then it's whatever the religion they have. I don't know, because my husband is not a Christian. He's an existentialist. And most of these guys are. Certainly Al Gray is. Krulak. I think his wife goes to church. But
their God is this Brotherhood.
The Brotherhood. And it's very German. It's very...
Does it have Masonic leanings?
Oh, absolutely Masonic leanings. In fact, the admiral who was the last admiral whose car my husband bought, he was very impressed with this Norwegian admiral. Mm. They're all Masons now. Mm-hmm. Not all Masons, but this Brotherhood, Opus Dei, if they're, or the mob. I mean, the one thing I've been able to determine about the current Marine Corps, the Marine Corps that my husband came in with, Gray, Reap, Sheehan, they're all mob.
Now, when you say mob, you're talking mafia type mob?
New Jersey mafia, right. Mm-hmm. Right.
And there's
Brooklyn, New Jersey.
Okay, is the mob and this military bunch, they're one and the same?
The Marine Corps guys are the hitmen. And they are mercenaries. They'll work for anybody. You think the Marine Corps is under the Navy? No way. They can just as easily be under an Army colonel. And if the Army colonel meets a Marine Corps colonel, the Army colonel is superior. They'll switch hats just like that. My husband said it's just, no big a deal. I'll go work for the State Department. I don't really. The Marine Corps is just it's like a smoke and mirrors thing. And they're run out of New Orleans. 4th Marine, Oswald. I mean, they are not on his level. He said, we've never been an enemy of the Soviet Union. They work with these communists. The man who started this whole intelligence operation, the OSS, he was recruiting known communists who were involved in the Spanish, subverting Spain. There's no more. They're not Americans. They're not Christians. They're German existentialists. Now, what are they doing running our nation? It's kind of, they have more affinity for the state of Israel right now than they do our nation. They don't care about American citizens. The judges now in the courts are military officers following chain of command orders. They're not independent judges.
So all this spills over then into the political areas, like the judgeships.
Sure. They're all Marines,
senators,
or Army officers,
congressmen.
Sure. Who is John Warner? A Marine. Who is Chuck Robb? A Marine. They control the powerful committees. Dick Davis, Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, a Marine. His wife was, I hate to say it, well, everybody knows, in Norfolk, a prostitute. Martha was a wonderful woman, I'm sure, to him. That's what Jesus Christ would be doing. If he were right here, he would be here right with me saying, go for it, little woman. You know, I'm giving you the strength to tell the daggone truth. And if you get killed tomorrow, you're going up there.
You're going to live forever.
That's
anyway.
right.
Well, now these, you mentioned when you get to be a bird colonel, and they have this initiation that involves all the sexual debauchery.
Yeah.
Now, would
Drinking first.
get them good and drunk.
Oh, big time drunk.
Because there would be some of these who, if they were sober, they wouldn't go through with it.
Couldn't go through with it.
They'd have to be blasted.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now, do you suppose, I don't know, your husband maybe told you, when they go through all this stuff that they do, are there people there gathering information,
Of course.
intelligence on them?
Of course. The chaplains are intelligence. You know, in Nazi Germany, that you had to tell on your parents, or in the Soviet Union, they encourage you to tell on your parents. Phil Holwager, the guys who go to Yale, who become chaplains, the chaplain corps is tell all the tales on everybody. They have collections agencies. These Marines are ordered to go and collect so-and-so at so-and-so. If a Marine tells truth, if he's a whistleblower, if the wife is too much trouble, they collect them, they throw them in, they fill them full of chemicals, they'll implant little things in them. I believe that my husband has an implant.
Well, McVeigh said he had a chip implant.
I believe George did. Now ask yourself, all right, George, I know George has had a male friend. You know, he has male friends.
Your husband is bisexual.
Yes, he's bisexual. And I was told that by colonels and a captain, by a psychiatrist.
What percentage do you think of these higher up people are bisexual?
Oh, all of them. If they're in special operations, if they're Marines, they're all bisexuals. They've all had to do it in order to get to be a bird colonel. The SEALs, it's kind of like the fast road to the top.
So a guy could not be a SEAL without having.
Oh,
gone through this.
I don't believe so. I haven't met one that I don't believe would have done it. And judging from what a couple of colonels told me, it's just, that's the norm. It's just you women, you know, y'all are so sissy, y'all are just, you know, you don't understand how it is. We're under so much pressure. And when Valerie Wilhelm told me that about Charlie, I just could not believe what
Charlie
she was
Wilhelm would be a.
He's a general now down in Miami. And she was just saying, oh, well, you know, he's running around. He has to, she said. He's under so much pressure. And the sons of some high-level people.
So you have all these powerful people in a club.
Yeah.
That has common goals.
Yeah. Which is global uniting. Global control. And I can see how one could sort of get sucked into it idealistically, thinking that you know, it's something that we should, world peace and harmony and everything. And I mean, I can understand wanting world peace and harmony. I'm trying to find a name here. But if you're a Christian, which I am, a Christian with a little c, because the early founding fathers never capitalized the word Christian. Did you know that? Did you know that all of the founding fathers were homeschooled? Did you know that?
Yeah,
Madison?
I was aware of that. Yeah.
Think about that. Did you know that all of the Virginian founding fathers were only gospel Christians? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Didn't even read the end time stuff, you know, the Old Testament. Did you know that Thomas Jefferson was a born-again Christian the last, 7 or so years of his life? Did you know he was corresponding with Adams in Massachusetts? That he took the New Testament and the Gospels and was trying to find out everything that Christ did. And I believe he was murdered. And I believe it had something to do with this Admiral Levy, who took a mortgage on his house so that he could build the University of Virginia, so that he could take and get his papers, his correspondence with Adams. I believe it was, now I'm the only one you will have ever heard this theory from. My undergraduate degree is in Virginia history.
Okay, so the University of Virginia was founded by Jefferson. Mm-hmm. Money that he obtained by mortgaging his home.
From a Kabbalist by the name of Admiral Levy.
Levy. Okay.
Now, I know that...
it is an interesting theory.
Of course it is. Dare to think, dare to theorize, dare to use the hypothesis, to come out with the thesis.
Now, Levy, you mentioned he's a Kabbalist.
Yes, and a Mason.
Like a descendant of the Illuminati.
Of course.
So,
a weapons dealer and a reserve military officer.
Even way back then.
They were doing... Now, think about this.
What they're doing today, they've been doing for
Of course.
many years.
Think about this. John Paul Jones. Supposedly the founder of our Navy, was a criminal. Why would they twist it like that? He was also a Kabbalist, also a Mason. He and Lafayette. Lafayette was a weapons merchant. They raise up some people who are sort of questionable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know for a fact that Jefferson became a Christian. He did not necessarily believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ, so maybe you could say he's not technically a Christian, but he said, I'm a Christian. He was working towards, he was going to Baptist churches. He was contributing to the American Bible Society. Do you hear this?
No, of course not.
Jefferson was a born-again Christian who was searching for truth, who was murdered, I believe.
Okay,
and at the same day he was murdered, so was Adams. Think about this, July the 4th.
And of course, you're being a Virginian and a
descendant of James Madison.
And a student of Virginia's history. Somebody like yourself could dig this out and would dig this out. It would be germane to you, whereas who else would it even be important to?
Yes, I was, God and my Christ have put me in the most amazing places and times. They were dependent on the government, on the intelligence community, selling weapons to whatever country. I know the country, but in other words, they were doing work for the joint under the table all these years.
Okay, and directly under whose instructions to sell these weapons? Do you know that?
Yeah.
Okay, who would that be?
Well, it's the Israeli Zionist group in New York.
Mossad? No.
Well,
what would they
yeah,
say?
but everybody thinks Mossad, like they think CIA is just a bogus sort of thing. It's really Army intelligence that does just about everything. They run a lot of the psychological profiling, which is done at Quantico with the FBI. It's all a very small group. Harvard professors connected with, the Tavistock and Dar es Salaam, and there's a sexual perversion group in Vienna and one in Colorado. I think that little girl was part of that experiment, who was
John
murdered.
Benet Ramsey?
Yeah, because I had some...
Well, that raises an interesting point, because here's a high-profile murder that goes nowhere. No investigation, nobody's pinned. It just goes on and on and on.
The parents are involved in that program.
But somebody higher
High
up
level.
is protecting them.
Absolutely.
And the same thing that you're describing about the military.
Sure.
If you're in the clique, you can get away with murder.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Murder, literally murder. And I had a group of visitors. I used to be set up by the State Department, my husband, who had power in the State Department, through both Caspar Weinberger and, his whole crowd. Caspar Weinberger, George Bush, Colby, Casey. My husband was in that clique. He was in the Princeton Marine Corps clique. Rob, Warner,
You're talking about Senator Rob.
Yeah, they're
and
all
Warner.
Marines. Pat Robertson, all 4th Marines. They're all involved in this. They know, they're running everything.
Now, you mentioned Pat Robertson. You're talking about the 700 Club, Pat Robertson.
Yeah, there's a power thing there. And it's all male, it's all white, and they know the murders are going on. They're surgical, they're strategic, they're political. Right.
Isn't there a disease that runs rampant with these people?
Yeah. So, but Al Gray, this guy, would guard the parties. Now, how does that make a young guy feel who's got a child? He's guarding an orgy with Israelis. There were Israelis at these parties. Intelligence people. Intelligence? There's not intelligence there. There's perversion. There's psychological, these guys are abnormal. They're adolescent. They're not full, complete people. They can't have normal. Anyway, so he's guarding the parties, and he says, the girls come in, they stay till about 11. They're all nude, all nudists. The Earls, Jim and Nancy Earl, my husband, Ty Kroll, most of the chiefs, nudists. Makes it easier, to see the little, it's terrible.
They're nudists in the sense that...
Yeah, they're nudist.
Okay, so they have whatever.
Freedom.
Oh, I see.
Freedom.
It's really kind of religious, isn't it?
Yeah.
With them.
Yeah. But the women leave at about 11 o'clock. This is what he said. I knew the girls were there because I'd already talked to the French girl. And he said, well, what they do is the women leave at about 11 o'clock, maybe 1 o'clock, and the guys all stay around there. And it's just the ritual. This is what they do. So, and then I found out...
these are the guys that send their boys to war.
Yeah, these are the big guys. Then I found out, because my husband would mention this guy and that guy, that he went to school with. Bob Edwards is involved with this stuff. But the guy who recruited him, Charles Caddick, who was a well-known homosexual, who was the, quote, head teacher, but the bodyguard for the Saudi boys. See, the Saudi boys were encouraged to do this, to corrupt them. They were corrupting Muslims who would not have done this ordinarily. The parties at Aramco, they would give the young boys, get them really drunk, and encourage Muslim sons to do this kind of stuff.
Muslim sons who would have a strong tendency toward morality.
Yes.
And to abhor this kind of...
That's right.
But if they could get them drunk and loaded enough that they would do this one time, then they would gain a controlling edge on these guys.
Now, this CIA thing, from my experience, is bogus. Because every person I've known who was in the CIA was in military intelligence first. For example, my husband. He told me furtively when I saw him in court, I don't work for the CIA. I knew he was telling the truth. He was afraid. He wanted me to know. Point is, he works under the Army. He's a Marine Corps, high-level intelligence officer. But he's under all these Army people, so I'm having to assume that the judge, the lawyers, the commissioners, all the people who are handling my husband when he's around me, because I really believe that he loves me, you know, even though he's under their control. I am a totally abused, psychologically, physically broken bones wife. Now, it says that if you are this way, you just get a warrant and you get your husband to say he's sorry or something. You know, that's all I wanted, was for my Marine Corps husband to say, I'm sorry that I did this. But if he's got men behind him telling him to do this, they're not going to let him say he's sorry, are they? Mm-hmm. No. If he's got Phil Holwager, the pastor, who's also Yale-trained intelligence chaplain with Pat Robertson, who's the pastor that I took my husband to try and get him to become a Christian, if he's meeting with Phil Holwager and Phil Holwager is telling my husband what to do, that says that Phil Holwager is a programmer for my husband. He's been trained in mind control. And Phil Holwager admitted to me, I've had psychological training, yes. And it slipped out. Oh, well, I made the mistake and told George, you know, in other words, he let me know that he has power over my husband. The mob in Virginia, Virginia Beach, is very, very strong, very well organized and connected with the military.
Yeah, well, you indicated for that there's a connection everywhere between the mob and military.
Absolutely. The
New
military
York or
is
San
run by the
Diego,
mob. The military is the mob. The Marine Corps are run, they're the assassins for the mob. They may only be in, as Tetson Myers was, for 4 years, but the individuals then go on to truck driving, you know, truck loading school. They're always loading things and, you know, moving things around. But then they send him to Harvard Law School. Mm-hmm. You know, then he winds up, when I met him, or just actually, I met him after Colby's murder. But I find it rather unusual that I had spoken with William Colby, the head of the CIA, mm-hmm. who knew my husband well, who told me on the phone all of this stuff about the Phoenix program and Israel, and all of that stuff was coming out, and that he was going to be doing it.
Okay, your husband told you?
No, William Colby on the phone. And Tetson Myers was across the hall from him.
Okay, so was William Colby
murdered?
A good guy from the get-go, or
yes,
was
he was a good guy.
One of the insiders they need to get rid of, or was he?
He was an insider who was involved. He knew about my husband's involvement with Krulak, Victor Krulak, Al Gray, the Russian double agent who was, I believe, Czechoslovakian or Georgian, who was called the Commissar, who was running everything in Vietnam. He was the murders, the assassinations. My husband was involved with the murders, the assassinations. He was involved with teams that did that. They were training boys to kill.
Okay, and
using
again,
mind control, using...
the whole reason for Vietnam or any of these conflicts is simply to use up a lot of arms and make money.
Yes.
Basically, that's all there is to it.
And to train more killers.
Mm-hmm. To use more weapons.
Absolutely.
To make more money.
Yeah. It's a sick, sad little adolescent boy cycle. These are not grown up. These are little men from Oz. That's what I call them. Al Gray is a sick little man.
Al Gray is a
that was the former commandant of the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
Carl Mundy is a sick, pathetic, lying little man.
And he is?
The former commandant of the Marine Corps. Then you have Krulak, who is a son of an agent, of a double agent, Victor Krulak. Not American. These are men who the Constitution is just beneath them. People like me, their wives, and citizens like you and honorable people are just beneath them because they're special. They're elite, just like the German SS. That's exactly where this specialness came from. Germany, from Nazi. In other words, they took with them the most perverted aspect of Nazi Germany, brought it over to the United States, because over 200,000 of these guys came over. And of that, there were some who were existentialist, humanist, anti-Christians. They hate Christians. Mm-hmm. You know, what happened to the Nazi, the cross of the Weimar Republic was turned this way. Hitler was homosexually recruited in a brothel. He was working in a little brothel. A Kabbalist, Zionist doctor came in and said, "Oh, you look special and great." And in other words, he was one of the many like Oswald who could be used. Mm-hmm. And they see how they grow rather than see how they go. They see how they grow, manipulate them. This is why they have so many, the Army has so many psychological operations specialists. And the one way to keep them is secrecy. And anybody who believes that Jesus Christ, I mean, everywhere you read in the Bible, he talks about openness. Mm-hmm. Truth is light. You walk tall. You don't hide behind trees and be the snake, mm-hmm. you know, in Adam and Eve, and be deceptive. Truth frees you. Mm-hmm. Truth is a liberator. It's your ally.
And the power of their operant conditioning is all in secrets.
And, of course, up to the present time, there have been assassins operating out of Rome, Milan in particular, Naples, and Paris. And these are all anarchists, all mob related. They use mob funding. Mm-hmm. And, of course, drug money to pay for the weapons, mm-hmm. which are brand new weapons. The Bosnia Bazaar, this is the reason we had the war in Bosnia. The war in Bosnia is simply a stage to train assassins, to be a market for brand new weapons, to be a marketplace so that the drug money can be used. And the Army runs the whole show. It's totally run by the Army. The CIA is a bogus thing. You know, it's training and doctrine command. It's NATO. It's SHAPE. Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, started by Eisenhower. It's a totally independent corporation. Its main function is to sell weapons and launder money.
You're talking about CIA?
No, talking about SHAPE.
SHAPE. Okay.
CIA is kind of bogus. I mean,
that's just
there.
A trade name for the media
to use. Oh, it's to
use.
confuse us. It's just to get us off the track. It's all being done by Army people who are now joint, because the word joint comes from the group that brought over a lot of good people came over, but they came over illegally to kind of escape Nazi Germany and stuff. I don't know that much about it, but I do know that the funding organization, one of the funding organizations was out of New York, and it was called the Joint. And Meyer Lansky, see, our mob, the organized crime, the Jewish Kabbalist group who don't believe in God really, well, they do. They look at God as a Kabbalah kind of thing, and the opposite of good is bad, and they have to get rid of all the good people and kill them, and then, you know, I mean, they really do this. They're killing people who are good on purpose, and they get brownie points with their little cult. But this funding group in New York, they would pay for passports which were illegal, and in fact, my grandfather was involved with that. That's how I know so much about it, because my grandfather was told to keep silent and not to tell anybody, but of course he told my grandmother, and my grandmother told me, and I've told my children. Everybody knows they brought in probably more than 200,000 Nazi soldiers and SS and, you know, wacko scientists and psychologists, and all of them, most of them, had the German disease, you know, because it was their culture.
The German disease?
Yeah, the German disease is what the Pink Triangle boys were. Colonel Ron Ray writes about this. He's a Marine colonel who's a Christian who's writing about the Cherry Marines, the homosexuality in the group sex orgies and so forth, which brought down the German government because Naples, which is where all of the Navy is doing their playing. I mean, today in Naples, these orgies are going on. It was where Krupp, the weapons manufacturer, used to take the German high command, and they would go into the Isle of Capri, into the Blue Grotto. And they would have big orchestras, and they'd bring in little boys, little Italian boys, who would be raped. They'd give them trinkets. And, of course, the mothers gradually found out, and just like me, it was one thing when there was just one of me. Now there are a lot more of us wives who are talking and telling truth. And it took those Italian women went to newspapers in Italy, they wouldn't listen. But when they went to the wives of these guys in Germany, it brought it all out. It brought the German government down because they were duplicitous in it, you know. But what they were doing was pedophilia. They were raping, bringing in little boys. They involved the Catholic priests, you know, who were bringing in all. Anyway, so, but what happened was this whole group came over to the United States. And they, it's an old culture, but it is the reason there are a lot of things going on with children these days. Mm-hmm. And it explains why it's all being covered up, because if you've got police officers who are playing these games and they're going in the woods like to, what is this place where, I mean, even Eisenhower played these games. Even Mike Kemp out in, it's called the Hermitage.
The Hermitage.
In California, where they all they get drunk and they run around nude in the woods and stuff.
Bohemian Grove kind of
That's
thing.
it, Bohemian Grove.
Okay, rather than Hermitage, is the Bohemian Grove?
Bohemian Grove, that's the name of it. Uh-huh. My brain's tired.
That's okay.
And the one in, there was a big one in Washington called Rush River Lodge, where they used to all go, and there are lots of places now. But the problem, as I see it, is that I think they're trying to destroy America and the basic Protestant Christian culture, because where you have a militaristic society, which is where the rules are only for those people, and keep in mind that Meyer Lansky and Luciano, Lucky Luciano, and the other man, they chose to go to Italy. Luciano went to Milan. He wasn't banished to Naples and Milan. The two top mob families went there because of the weapons industry. They're selling weapons. I mean, that's what the military is doing. It's totally controlled by the mob. Look at this. Weinberger was General Douglas MacArthur's. He spied on MacArthur in Korea. Who was MacArthur's nemesis? Albatross. It was none other than little old intelligence. I'm going to tell every move you make. Weinberger. Young, but he did it. He brought down MacArthur. Every move MacArthur was going to make, he broadcast it through the chaplain, his little intelligence network. And he got brownie points with the group because he brought down the big lion. When you get rid of a big lion like that, you get a big job. You've done good work. And they needed to get rid of MacArthur because he didn't want to keep the wars going. He wanted it over, and it's like General Trefay, who took over after the Vietnam War was over, And he was on C-SPAN in August of '96 with former Ambassador Whitehead and a few of the other the State Department Vietnam people. And General Trefay, he had been holding this in for years. He was on C-SPAN. This man let it all out. He said, I took over at the end of the Vietnam War. I was in control, right? Big general charge. So I say, cut off the shipment of weapons. So I tell the Pentagon, cut off the shipment of weapons. He said, I got a phone call from Henry Kissinger saying, the weapons are going to continue at the wartime rate.
Sure.
Now, that's when all this stuff with China started. It started before then, because already the communist agents, the New York, Brooklyn, New Jersey mob, were already training Mao. Mao was trained in Paris. So was, the one in Cambodia. What's his name? I can't think of his name. The one who was Pol Pot.
Yeah.
They were homosexually, bless their little hearts, by priests. They were wonderful little boys sent there, turned, which is the word, when they believe their mothers, and then all of a sudden the world's horrible, and then they have these wonderful friends who are going to make them leaders.
Yeah.
They're turned psychologically, and it's a pattern. And so this is why it's so important to know what they are doing to innocent little boys in the Army and the Marine Corps today. Why? Why are they having them go together in groups and strip nude when they're brand new inductees?
Uh-huh.
Why do they do certain things in public, in front of the group? And
Well, they even do that during the pre-induction physical?
Yes.
I mean,
and they also had the doctor.
that's why I didn't want to go in the Army. I knew there was something.
Yeah. But they also turn around the other way after doing that. The other way, and they're upside down. And they do this anally.
Uh-huh.
Now, why do they do that in public? Why are the urinals all out in public, without separate stalls?
Yeah.
If they're not promoting this. And then why is it that the ones who are this way rise up faster than the ones who don't?
Because there's someone there noticing
Yeah, sure.
those
sure.
who are
Vulnerable.
vulnerable. I was going to say rising, but that wouldn't be quite appropriate.
They're called rising stars.
Rising stars.
Rising, that's the word the State Department uses for those who are controlled. The Israelis train with the SEALs. They do a lot of wet ops, murders,
Okay.
over here because of some sort of arrangement. The young boys, I met 3 young assassins on a bus going up back and forth to Sarah as I went on the bus because they were sabotaging my car so often. So I sat next to 2 young assassins, one from Romania, one from Haiti. And I let them know that I understand, how it is. And this little boy cried. I won't mention which one it was because it may get back to him. But he told me it was the same scenario. His mother, he lives on $850 a month. Now, these are mercenaries working. The taxpayers are paying mercenaries. The taxpayers are paying young men who are not citizens of the United States to kill innocent people, women and children. They get on a flight from Norfolk and Oceana. They fly to Stuttgart, and I was told this is what they do. Then they go by a special helicopter to countries like Turkey, like the part of Iraq, to Algeria, to parts of Africa, and they do wet ops. They'll just, you know, murder 5, 10, 20 people, and then they blame it on the Arabs, or they blame it on somebody else, but it's actually NATO rogue assassins, because there are men from Australia, South Africa, Britain, that I've been able to determine, and a lot of these other little countries that are sort of wanting to get into NATO, they have little boys that they pick out, and they call them special. They use the word special, meaning elite, irregular, in order to entice these boys because they don't have much ego. So if you call being a criminal, in other words, they are protected. They know that they are above the law. That's what my husband's above the law. I'm trying to fight for all these other women and mothers, and for the people who know truth, and because I'm verbal, because I'm articulate, and I'm also gullible, you know, I want to believe that there's somebody good out there who's going to help me fight this thing. Because I've got photographs of being battered. I've got doctors' signatures. Sarah McClendon, the senior White House correspondent, has an affidavit where she tried to call my house. And men answered the phone and said, this is a military base, and the Griggses don't live there anymore. Now, Sarah McClendon could not even get through to my house. For 2 months, she had to go to another phone just to call me. So I knew that all these other people I'd called in Washington were trying to call me, and the calls were being rerouted. Now that is in this book. This I found in Goodwill. And so I shouldn't mention this because they're going to go now start culling Goodwill, but all the intelligence divorces, there are a lot of divorces going on. The wives will throw out their husbands' books, or the husbands will throw them out. They're mad at the government. But, you know, I found that's why they've been raiding my library. That's why they've been...
What's the title of this book?
This book is called Intelligence and Electronic Warfare Operations.
Okay.
Now, this book is all about what happened to me. Army, Air Force, Marine Corps. Where is the FBI Psychological Operations Unit? Quantico, Marine Corps base. The only FBI agent who came to me, who was allowed to come to me, was Dan McNally, 20-year Marine. Homosexual, I believe. I'm pretty sure he is, because you know, and I'm not saying that he's a bad person, but I am saying that I was not allowed by any other FBI to have any other FBI agent come and hear about the break-ins to my home, the battering that I went through, nearly killed, the murder of my husband's first wife, serious business. She's in a grave, Suzanne Workman Griggs. She died on April Fool's Day, 1987. And the doctor wanted to do an autopsy. Couldn't do it, because the 2 men who were doctors in that hospital, Dr. Lawrence Smith and Jean Lamb, Army officers. They owe their life to this business.
And they take orders. Because I think it was Orwell said that he who controls the past controls the future, and he who controls the present controls the past.
Absolutely.
So those who control the present can modify the past any way they want. In fact, they could erase you right out of the picture.
Why do you think we're in computers and everything's on computers? George said what they do is they nurture, they cultivate the sons of prominent families in all, the State Department finds them. They're called rising stars.
Yeah.
And they turn. That's the word they used, George used. They turn them. They bring them in. They rope them in. If they're alcoholics, give them more booze than anybody. If they want women, they find the women. They turn them, and then let them know if they ever get in any trouble, come on over here. We'll take care of you. Well, Fahim had come on over here. Things were getting hot in Beirut. He was a Catholic. He was very prominent family, and he was going in hiding up in Maine. I remember I had his number, and I talked to his sister, but they culled a lot of the stuff out of the house the very first time when George kind of disappeared, and and then I found out about what happened with Sue, his first wife, and all of that.
Well, now, did they? Did you come to learn how drugs actually come into the country?
Yeah.
I saw a news piece one time where a pilot who was in prison alleged that they actually landed on military bases with huge planes loaded with dope.
This is how they all brought them in. The Norwegians, the Brits. The drugs, you see, they would come down through Burma, Turkey. They'd come through the Bekaa Valley. The banks were in Beirut. They were in Panama, Mexico, in St. Thomas after, the laundering of cash. You see, cash, that's why some of the banks in New York, you can very easily find out who the drug lords are. Barry McCaffrey, I saw him 2 weeks ago, and he said something he let it slip out. He's an Army general, He said, we haven't done any more or any less in the last 5 years. Now...
In terms of the war on drugs?
Yeah, no, they're just holding it. The word he used, I think, was holding it. It was a word that you could tell they'd used in briefings. They were, the guys who were doing the drugs are military officers. In fact...
Doing the drugs meaning controlling
them.
The flow.
Oh, yeah. In fact, one of George's best friends, Colonel Ray Moore, I suspect that Ray Moore was from the gang, the ghetto area in California. His wife was a very good friend of mine, Charlotte.
She's dead?
No, he is.
Oh, he is.
But when George would sort of disappear...
Your husband?
Yeah, all of a sudden, they would appear and be in the house. Calm me down, take me over, exercise, do all this mystical stuff. And it was really funny because they came back from Mexico. And George just happened to disappear, and they were right there, Well, Ray Moore, all this stuff, I knew about his background, and I started thinking, what's going on in Mexico? Why the heck is Ray going down to Lake Chapala? And he would talk about his day. His day would be going out with the men, playing golf, going to this spa with the men, They were doing deals, going to Guadalajara. And there would be Tom Reap, another former chief of staff for Gray, going to Mexico. There would be Ken Millis, another temporary chief of staff when George's wife's funeral took place. There was Ken Millis. Now these are guys who are part of we call the Brotherhood, and they're all going down to Mexico. So what's going on in Mexico? Ray's one of these guys who wants to sit in the sun. He doesn't want to go down there to Mexico and do all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But he did. I know a lot about the triangular trade, what was going on in Bermuda.
Okay, triangular trade. For
yes,
our
Tom
viewers.
Devine. The triangular trade is the illegal weapons, drug trade that is still going on today. Israel is basically running it with the New York bankers. it has something to do with Kabbalism, because the Pentagon, the symbol for the Pentagon, the Brotherhood, they feel so compelled to not think for themselves, to sort of depend on somebody else who's more physics-oriented, you know. In other words, these guys are so much smarter than I am. They can be doing totally immoral things that, you know, are breaking up families, breaking up, you know, wives. And in other words, they're not looking at the structure of the family. They're not looking at the structure of society. They're not looking at the culture, the community, the basic ingredient that provides life, the planet, the trees. They're not looking at anything but sex. And when one perverts and twists, in other words, one focuses on, yes, sex is wonderful. You know, it's great. I'm a, you know, great proponent. But there's so much of a focus by this group on sex. And the military, you know, they go back to Greek days, and they have all these symbols of, you know, the Washington Monument is supposed to be a phallic symbol, you know, and they say, well, this proves, you know, because the Greeks were doing it, the Egyptians were doing it, and it's this secret little group that was, you know, back in the days of Nefertiti and you know, Mark Antony, and it just proves that we're just great because we had the Holy Roman Empire, and Alexander Great that was homosexual, and Catherine the Great was, you know. But it's debauchery. The thing that one has to realize is that God knows best. You know, It is an abomination. It is a sin. Now, we've all sinned. We're all sinners. I don't believe we should be putting people on stakes for doing this. I think Jesus Christ said, the simple answer is this, which Mandela said, the simple answer is this. Just repent. Just show that you're changing your life. You know, I've sinned. Everybody's sinned. I don't believe that that targeting people, whether you target them this way or that, is the answer. Mm-hmm. Now, this is just my personal opinion. I am not a judge. I wish I could be a much better judge than any of the Kabbalist male judges in Virginia Beach, because they are doing this to women, mothers, who are honorable people who are telling truth. Wherever the Brits tended to go, whether it was India or Africa, they allowed the cultures. They still wore saris, and they still were, you know, the ragheads were ragheads to protect their heads from the sun. Now they're called ragheads, and they're targeted as enemies by our little boys. Our little boys are taught to hate ragheads and to kill raghead women. Well, I don't think that's very Christian. So I'm looking at the top guys, and they're not Christians. So it begs the question, well, what are they? Well, that question was in my mind after I was married 3 years, and I started delving. My own little Miss Marple, my own little, you know. And I've arrived at the definite conclusion that they're not only not Christians, but when you have group sex and homosexual sex and orgies and things of this nature by the top people who are running my city, at least, certainly Virginia Beach, I started looking at other military towns and started asking questions. San Diego, the same thing. San Francisco, the same thing. Key West, everybody knows about Key West. Boston.
Did your husband ever tell you anything about any disease warfare, like giving people sicknesses and?
Yeah, that's part of. He called it ABC, NBC. It was something like nuclear, biological, chemical, ABC, atomic, biological, chemical. They call it biologicals. And in fact, I'm not going to mention his name because this is a guy who's really a good guy who's scared. The word they use is shitless. Excuse me. But that's the word. this guy is petrified
Because
he's doing that work
the chemical,
and biological work. The Marine
you mean the laboratory work or the implementation?
dealing, subterfuge, deception in the
Okay.
Middle East.
Okay, and they use
He's a Marine Corps colonel.
disease-causing drugs?
Absolutely.
And then how do they administrate them?
In missiles and in I mean this is an elaborate big business. Like Peter Kawaja, Marine Corps guy, who's working in plain clothes at one of the plants in Florida. This is why George is in Florida. This is why they're all down in Florida, because all of this stuff is being. We manufactured the chemicals and biologicals that were in Iraq. Now, if you don't believe me, you don't believe Peter Kawaja, a Marine Corps colonel, he says they killed his wife, I believe him. He worked in one of these factories. It was supposedly a candy factory where they were manufacturing deadly, deadly killer things. Henry Kissinger was a well-known, totally a homosexual, not even both ways.
And so his wife is a marriage of...
Oh, it's just a convenience. Yeah, and he might, maybe he's discovered women in his late age, I don't know. But, no, I heard through a very well-grounded German that Henry's best friend's father told Henry to stay away from him, and that's why Henry left. The family were embarrassed, and Henry went to Britain, where they did this, and then changed his name from Heinz to Henry. And I interviewed a man named Bob, who's an Army enlisted person who told me about Henry in Cambodia. So he, up through Cambodia, he was actually raping young men. And of course, that experience destroyed the lives of these 5 young men, according to the source. I mean, he said he was crying, and this man was a perfectly wonderful, functioning, young married man who worked for a newspaper on the Eastern Shore and had 3 young children, went to Vietnam as an enlisted man, was put in Cambodia, which he said it was a lie living there, and then ran into Henry Kissinger, or Henry Kissinger ran into him and did certain things to him, invited him into his tent with some other men. It was horrible, but it was, he said it's wartime and so forth. But he said, I could have taken it mentally if it had been a bunkmate or something. But he said, when it's someone like Henry Kissinger who does it to you, you're ruined. He said, I could never, he said he came back home. Oh, and this is interesting, and I really believe that Bob's right. He said, Kissinger said to him, if you ever tell anybody, if you ever mention a soul, it's the end of you. Don't you ever tell anybody. Well, when Bob got back, he went to a special hospital, and they were going to keep him locked up forever.
Bob.
A lot of the other boys just, my feeling is that he was flagged the way I was flagged when General Gray and, Wilhelm had me flagged because I broke up the go-go dancing in the officers' club. I was labeled a troublemaker because I thought it was wrong for married men to be going out with topless go-go dancers in the officers' club dining room, and I took pictures of it, and my husband, got really mad and so forth.
And these pictures today are still with you, or they're missing?
Oh, no. My husband, what happened, I had the pictures. I risked my life because he tried to grab the camera from me. I hid it in the women's bathroom, and he tried to get it from me. We had a terrible fight that night. He wanted the pictures, and I prevailed. I developed the pictures, wrote a very nice Southern letter, wrote the letter to the club manager saying I didn't think it was proper, had 3 sets, actually 4 sets of the 3 photographs I took made, and I sent a copy of the letter and the photographs to the base commander's wife and to the commandant's wife, and it stopped. But I was flagged, so I know, but this was before Tailhook, and yet instead of being congratulated for helping family values, for standing up for the wives, for showing the Marine Corps the proper place to have nudity and debauchery is not in the dining room of Camp Lejeune. And my husband said, well, this is nothing compared to Okinawa. You just have to get used to it, he told me. Now, I was a colonel's wife. These were young majors, and they were seeing me being talked down to. What do you think it did to them? It demoralized them. The Marine Corps was demoralized. The wives were demoralized, and I did what was right, what Jesus Christ would have done. How can they call themselves Christians and condone, how can Al Gray and Wilhelm and Cook and my husband condone this kind of behavior and flag me as a weirdo? Mm-hmm. So there's something, and that's where I'm standing. I'm standing on what I know Jesus Christ would have done. And if they want to, continue to hound me because I'm telling truth, well, that's just the way it is, because I'm not going to lie and develop a different kind of personality just to please them. I had so many blows on the head, you can't even believe it. Broken bones and so forth. Well, in the middle of these terrorism episodes that my husband would put me through, he would say things like, I'm down on the ground, he's got a 45 to my head, or he's strangling me with his thumb on my jugular vein, and he's saying in this sergeant-like voice, you have got to believe me. You cannot question me. In other words, it's like, I am being interrogated, or it's the most awful experience to have the one you want to love, the one you have made your commitment with, have you in pinholes, and knowing he's an experienced guy, so it's horrible. He tried to kill me that night to scare me so that I would behave. But I was raised in a family with strong men. You stand tall. You don't let people intimidate you when you know you're right. Mm-hmm. Because there are more important things. God is above us all. Jesus Christ is above us all. Truth is above everything. The 10 Commandments are above everything. Under that is Jesus Christ, and then your mate. So I put, that's why I put him in very high esteem, but I knew he was not normal. I'm an intelligent woman. I read. So I was hoping I could change him. Mm-hmm. So it was a battle. It was a spiritual battle going on. I knew it was a spiritual battle. And I was believing that that I could, reprogram him, essentially, subconsciously. Now, I didn't know that at the time, what was going through me, but I was really being tested.
Of course, the many years of operant conditioning he'd been through fortified and solidified his positions.
Yes.
He was far more entrenched an operative than you were going to be able to undo.
Oh, he was involved in the HALO program, the MAC SOG.
HALO? What's HALO?
He mentioned it was something to do with training assassins and training psychological operations specialists. It was in the Philippines. They also had one in Panama.
Okay.
They had a school for Army and other guys where they would strip them down nude. They would tie them onto logs. The man who ran the school was dressed up as a Nazi soldier, even though his name was Olenchek or something. He was a Czechoslovakian pervert. Then they had a man who dressed up like a woman who was really pretty, you know. And here are these guys nude, and they're training them to kill.
You know, as these generals, over the period of years, this is consolidated to where they're all part of this club. I mean, this is something that's been going on for years and years and years.
Members of the firm.
Okay, so as the firm grows, even as the old guys, the gray heads get old, die off, retire, whatever, they already set in motion a system that culls out these young, budding, rising stars, and they move their way up. Well, then, in time, it consolidates to where no one is in this unless they're in the club.
Absolutely.
So is your conclusion, based on what you know from your husband's revelations, reading his diaries, this sort of thing, is there anybody in the U.S. military, the Army and Marines, anybody in the level of, you know, your generals and your colonels, is there anybody who would not be in this club?
There's nobody who doesn't know. In special operations, I would say, and I would put money in the bank on this, not one of them is not a party to this. It's not once they get that bird, Colonel, that bird, they go through an initiation ceremony. This is not and my husband told me about that too.
What's the initiation ceremony like?
They get them drunk. Dining in, shell back. He told me.
Oh, dining in. This is a term that they use.
Oh, yeah.
A code word.
Oh, yeah.
Shell back?
Shell back. They,
what's that mean?
Anal sex. But they get them really drunk. The guys who are that way do it. It's a group situation thing. And I was told by two colonels who said, you know, it's normal, Kay. This is just what we do in battle, you know.
This is just good old boys?
This is just what we do, Kay.
They get drunk and they
get drunk and they ejaculate. They beat each other off. You know, it's awful. Now, I'm not God, and I'm not going to judge them and their souls. This is a well-oiled system. And when you've got the commandant well-known as a cherry Marine,
which means?
Bottom. They're the bottom. The Navy guys are on the top. Think about this, because Walter Chrysler in Norfolk, each port has a hierarchy. Wealthy at the top. Walter Chrysler and Phil Hornthal. Everybody in Norfolk knows that. Where'd they meet? In the Navy. I was engaged to Jack Mace when I was at the Virginia Center for World Trade. He ran the Maritime Association, the Shipping Association. Always dealt with the labor union guys, always all male banquets. And I couldn't understand why, you know, I was engaged and I couldn't even go to the 1,000-man banquet. You know, had a big argument about that. Rock Hudson, where did he meet his guy? Navy. Jim Neighbors, Navy. All of these guys, Navy. So they're tapped for whatever it is, acting, singing, you know. The point is, Liberace, you know.
Was he Navy?
I believe he was. I know that he was, someone told me that he was a friend of one of the guys in Norfolk. There was a ring, a VMI ring of men in Norfolk, and I knew they met once a month, and some of them were married, some of them weren't. But they were all Navy. They were Army, Navy. In other words, it was kind of a group of men in Norfolk. And then I found out that the organizations, like right now, the Al-Anon is run by homosexuals. The Better Business Bureau. The Community Fund, which is the, I forget what it's called now. I'm so old, I'm 55, but it used to be called the Community Fund. That guy. Jack Mace, you know. And I'm wondering which one isn't. You know, I mean, they all are, and the guys know it. So what's going on here?